United States, as one of the developed nations in the world, has been experiencing a tremendous year in 2014 in terms of the economy. In contrast, emerging countries such as Indonesia has been experiencing an economic slowdown, as shown in the first and the second quarters. However, both countries are sure challenged to face the circumstances related to economic conditions next year. How will the outlook of the economy in 2015 be? Let's take a look at this one. As one of developed nations in the world, the United States is experiencing a unique scenery of economy. America's economy is finally beginning to feel like it is picking up pace. According to figures published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, total employment in America increased by 248,000 in September, driven by big jumps in professional services, retail, and healthcare. The unemployment rate dropped below 6% for the first time since 2008. Meanwhile, jobs growth figures for August and July were also revised up by 69,000, suggesting the economy was not as weak in those months as previously thought. The figures will reassure economists who had been wondering whether the economy was really bouncing back. Deutsche Bank have already raised their forecast of annualized GDP growth in the third quarter from 3.7% to 4.2%. On the other hand, while still strong by global comparison, Indonesia's economy has gradually slowed in 2014. Based on Central Statistic Agency data, economic growth in the second quarter of year 2014 was recorded at 5.12%, a deceleration compared with the first quarter at 5.21%. The slowdown was at first largely owed to lower global prices for key Indonesian export commodities such as thermal coal, natural rubber, gold, and crude palm oil, and more recently also to slowing investment and consumption. How is the global economy outlook in 2015? To discuss more about this, stay with Ravinews International. Recently, my colleague William Hsu had an interview with Mr. Rodney D. Ludema, Chief Economist of U.S. State Department. Let's have a look.
All right, viewers, I'm here at America with Mr. Rodney D. Ludema, the Chief Economist of U.S. State Department, and we are talking about the U.S. state economy. And also, we saw so many challenges faced by the state economy, and we're going to see what's challenges ahead in 2015 like. All right, Mr. Ludema, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
All right, I'm doing well too.
Yeah, good.
It's an honor to be here with you. But before we move on to the state's economy, first of all, let me ask, what's your impression about Indonesia? Have you heard about it prior to your 2 days being here?
Oh, I've heard lots about the Indonesian economy. And I think it's, but you can't truly appreciate a place until you've been here. And I've been very impressed with what I've seen. It's, at least Jakarta seems to be an amazingly vibrant city.
It's a vibrant city.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that what I've heard in talking with government officials and business leaders and economists here in Indonesia is that Indonesia is on the one hand facing some challenges, but the exciting news is that you have a new president, Jokowi, and
Exactly.
And he has some big plans, some ambitious plans about how to meet that challenge, and so. We're looking forward to seeing how that goes.
We're looking forward to see how that goes. Let's go straight into the overview of the state's economy. What do you think about the state's economy this year?
Well, I think on the whole, the U.S. economy is doing quite well. Growth is up. We're one of the few countries that the IMF did not downgrade in its latest downgrade of economic growth projections. And I think it reflects some underlying strength in the U.S. economy. You know, we came out of a deep recession
Exactly.
And it's taken a long time for various reasons, it's taken a long time to get this far. But I think that domestic demand is strong. Energy production, in particular, is a real bright spot for the U.S. Economy. And I expect that U.S. growth will be strong this year and well into next year, which is pretty important considering how many other countries in the world seem to be struggling these days.
Sounds like a solid projection, you're saying. All right, economic growth in the States shows an impressive improvement with minus 2.1% GDP growth in first quarter and then jumped by 4.6% on the second quarter. What are the main contributors that boost the performance?
Well, I think the key for the U.S. economy has been the end of the period of deleveraging. Following the recession. So, prior to the crisis, households had accumulated an enormous amount of debt. When the crisis hit, the government wisely responded with substantial fiscal stimulus. But after that period of time, there was considerable deleveraging, both on the household level and at the government level. Basically, a series of standoffs between the President and Congress over the budget resulted in a dramatic reduction in the U.S. Budget. So a fiscal contraction, alongside of household deleveraging as households worked off their debts, and so that's what extended the recession. But that, I think if you look at the data now, you see that household debt is back to pre-crisis, quite historic low, or historic averages, I should say. And the government budget deficit is also very much under control. So I think that's giving market participants a lot of confidence in the U.S. economy. Of course, it also doesn't hurt that the Federal Reserve has been quite accommodative in its monetary policy.
Quite accommodative.
Yeah.
I like that. All right, let's jump into a current account balance. It shows a positive improvement as the deficit decreased by $3.6 billion US dollars to 102.1 billion recorded in the first quarter. What policies should be taken to improve the performance, as current account deficit is also one of the main problems currently faced by our country, Indonesia?
Well, interestingly enough, I think the current account deficit dynamics in the U.S. and Indonesia is actually quite similar. It has a lot to do with oil, and one of the main reasons our current account has been improving as fast as it has is because of increased oil production. But we're also seeing growth in a lot of other sectors. Manufacturing is coming back to the U.S. economy. Strong services growth, and we are big exporters of services, so that's helping the current account as well.
All right.
But I would say that the big driver, at the end of the day, is oil. That we're producing more and importing less.
All right, so it's coming back to oil again after all. When you mentioned manufacturing sectors, it's really interesting to me. I mean, how come the U.S. is coming back to manufacturing sector, and how can the government give an incentives for manufacturing to be more alive?
Well, I think that energy costs play part of a role, but I also think that wages have not grown. That's actually one of the troubling aspects of the U.S. economy, is that wages have not grown substantially coming out of the recession. But that's also meant that U.S. competitiveness is quite strong.
It's quite strong.
And so, I think that I don't expect manufacturing to ever become, as big as it once was in the U.S. economy, particularly on the employment side. But it is good that manufacturing is making a comeback, as it should. I think that it was arguably held back in previous decades by a number of factors. But what can we do to promote manufacturing? I think that one of the more innovative, I think that one of the more innovative policies that the Obama administration has pursued has been the establishment of innovation clusters, bringing together businesses, universities in one place, and other groups in one place to try and create kind of synergies between industries. I mean that type of thing is, I mean, it always occurs on a sort of natural, agglomeration tends to occur on naturally anyways, but I think actively promoting it and thinking smart about how the government can facilitate that is an important part of manufacturing growth.
All right, sounds good to me. All right, we'll talk more about the Indonesian economy maybe in the later segment, of course, Mr. Rodney.
Okay.
All right, viewers, we'll be right back with more discussion with Mr. Rodney Ludema. Stay tuned and don't go anywhere.